Hi, I'm Dr. Selena Fisk, and welcome to this episode of Make Data Talk. In this podcast, I help you turn your spreadsheets into stories in a way that is practical, accessible, and hopefully a whole lot more useful than your grade 9 maths textbook. For this episode today, I'm going to reflect on a little essay that Derek Sivers wrote in his book, Hell Yeah or No. If you haven't checked it out, it's actually a really kind of quick read, but rather than it being, I guess, something that you pick up and read from front to back, it's got a whole lot of different essays or kind of thought-provoking ideas that are kind of only a page or two long. And it's a really great read, and it's all kind of framed through that lens of hell yeah or no, meaning that we should be doing things that are absolutely a hell yeah and saying no to everything else. The page that I really like from Derek Sivers' book is called Think Like a Bronze Medalist, Not a Silver. And he uses the example of the Olympics, and he talks about people being on a podium at the end of an event at the Olympics. And he says something along the lines of, imagine what it's like to be a silver medalist. You've just missed out on gold. Imagine, you might have been in swimming, for example, 0.01 of a second away from winning that event, but you were so close, but you didn't actually make it. So, there might be a little element, I guess, of disappointment. On the other hand, you could look at somebody who's a bronze medalist and, if they'd been 0.01 of a second slower in that event, for example, they may have not made the podium. And so he says there can be a real difference in thinking between a silver medalist feeling like they have, I guess, missed out on the gold, as opposed to some bronze medalists are absolutely just really, really stoked to be there. Interestingly, there's a lot of research around that says that some of the happiest athletes are the ones who win bronze, and it's almost unexpected because even if you win a gold, there's then an ongoing, perhaps, expectation around performance and future performance, and it can often put a lot of stress and added kind of pressure on those athletes who have performed at the very highest level. But what he talks about is this idea of our comparison that we're making should be that we're comparing down rather than comparing up. So he says the problem with a silver medalist is that they compare up to the gold, whereas a bronze medalist often can compare down. And we know that this is a generalization, but just bear with me for a bit. And I want to think about how that relates to our use of data. One of the key things that I see when I go into organizations and we talk about the data that they have and the trends and the insights that they can see, there's often a really heavy focus on the negatives and on the deficits and the gaps and the opportunities. And that absolutely needs to happen. And that's almost thinking like that silver medalist. So we're using data to identify what we can do better, what maybe we can shift in the future, what areas of the business or the team, or I guess the approach could do with some, I guess, a bit more attention and focus from us. And all of that's really awesome and absolutely, is a great way to be using data. And there's this whole other section of the data that we collect and we track that allows us to actually look at, well, what are the bits that we're doing well? Like, where has the success actually come from? What aspects of the business or the team or our work are actually going really well? How do we know that? And then not just dismiss it, but we actually want to double down on that and go, well, how do we take that learning from the positive and apply it to other aspects? Like, what does it tell us about what we're doing at the moment that's really working and landing? And how do we learn from that and then capitalize on that amazing kind of achievement? And so from this, going back to the Derek Sivers example of the thinking like a bronze medalist, it's almost like when we're thinking just about the deficits and the gaps and what could have been, we're thinking like a silver medalist. But when we're thinking about, say, the successes we've had, what's worked really well, we're almost thinking like a bronze medalist. We're framing it in a much more, I guess, positive way of thinking. And we're also looking at it as, and looking at the data as an opportunity, not just a judgment. So we're able to kind of go, right, these are all the things that we can do now that we know these positive things and we can learn from them and shift and adapt. The other piece that I really like about the Sivers model of thinking like a bronze medalist is that idea of shifting from, I guess, with data, that deficit model into more of a growth mindset use of data. So as I've just been mentioning, it's sometimes there's a real assumption that data has got to be, or data analysis has got to be surrounded by almost like this negativity. And, almost like it's feedback that what we're doing is actually not enough. But when we can start to look at it as an opportunity and frame it really positively, what we're likely to be able to do is also to bring more people on board with the use of data in our businesses. Because one of the key reasons that I hear people kind of voice to me about the reasons that they don't like data is that there is an an overarching focus on the negative. And people have said to me, look, we're working really hard. We feel like we're achieving so much. We're doing so much. We've made so much progress. And when we look at data, it's just this is not enough. This is what's possible. Like, we've got to do this again. And so it's being able to look at it as, I guess, framing it through the positive so that we can bring people along on the journey with us. In one of my books, I've created a couple of like templates around conversations that you can use for, templates to frame the conversations for using data. And one of the things that I recommend in that book is that we actually, for teams of people who are quite nervous about the use of data, is that we start with the positives. And so if we just look at the bright spots, so Dan and Chip Heath talk about the idea of bright spots and looking for almost the glimmers. It's almost kind of capitalizing on that idea. If you've got people that are apprehensive, just get them digging into the data and having conversations about what they see in it from the lens of, or from the perspective of, what are those positive things that we can see? What does that tell us about our current practice? And then how can we replicate those findings maybe into other categories? So when we're introducing data to those fearful people, we don't even need to start talking about the gaps and the opportunities. We can just start really gently by looking at the positives. And hopefully what that does is it just gives people the time and space to see the potential and see that data is not as scary as maybe they had initially anticipated, and that there's some really awesome stuff that we can see in it as well. And the final opportunity that I think, looking at data through this bronze medalist kind of thinking, what it does for us, is that it also allows us to look at how far we've come. So not just looking at the positives, but looking at the distance traveled. So where were you? Where was the team? Where was the organization 6 months ago, 12 months ago? What's the data telling you about that period of growth and the movement that's taken place over that period? And again, it's totally reframing the use of data. But there's a whole piece that we can do with the information we have that looks at the journey that has taken place. And what that can do is it can motivate people to think about new solutions. It can inspire innovation. It might sustain the momentum that you've already got going. Like, if you're working really hard on a change project and you can see really clearly in the data that you're making and have made really good progress, actually, it could really motivate people to keep going on that journey, which is great. And the final thing that it can do is it can then kind of go, well, yes, we're using data to inform decisions, but the data we're using is actually showing that what we're doing is working and we're heading in the right direction. The really, I guess, lovely part of all of that is that we can then start to celebrate and recognize those wins. We can celebrate the progress. We can celebrate teams, individuals. We can completely reframe that potentially negative comparison up use of data to actually celebrating the growth and the change and the wins that we've had. And that's ultimately going to be really good for our people, and it's going to be really good for building a culture that is informed by data. So thanks so much for joining us on this episode of Make Data Talk. The challenge this week is certainly to get you thinking about how can you use data in a way that compares down more often, so like a bronze medalist, rather than comparing up and thinking about what you've missed out on. If you found this useful, the newsletter is available on LinkedIn, so all of this is available in written format as well if you'd like to check that out. I have a data diagnostic on my website. It's at selinafisk.com/corporates or /schools, depending on which one you would like to take. If you found this useful, it'd be awesome if you could share this with others. And as always, take good care of yourself.